we're also joined right now by Ashton, who's the director of the Business Advisory Services at the U.S.-China Business Council. It's wonderful to see you, Anna. What about your response to the latest development?
Well, I mean, it's hardly surprising. Every time that the United States has announced new tariffs on Chinese imports, China has announced new tariffs on U.S. imports to China. So, it's expected, unfortunately.
It's expected, and I guess we are used to it, even though the impact could be quite something. Mr. Liu, looking at what's going on right now between China and the United States, what do you make of it? It's a global economic impact. In fact, that's why the rest of the world is concerned about this, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, many recent reports by international organizations are all pointing to a downturn development model. I mean, including some major economies in the world, including the US, Germany, China, and others. I mean, so we are seeing a glooming cloud gathering around. Of course, I mean, there's also some other still positive signals that the world economy could still benefit from some of the, what I would call, strong strengths, that some economies are still growing, employment are still high, wages are still starting to grow, so on and so forth. And the companies also have a nice cash flow. So I mean, both negative and positive signals are there. Of course, the kind of negative pictures is looming larger.
Yeah.
The only thing we need to see is how the governments, the leaders, are going to respond to that to turn the gloomy picture into a brighter one.
I guess that's the biggest uncertainty our world is facing right now, what the leaders are doing these days. Ms. Ashton, let me go to you. There are some signs. GDP-wise, U.S. is doing well still. But if you look at the manufacturing output, it's been down rather than going up, and also the jobs being created over the past few months, it's lower than expected, even though there are still quite a number over there. Meanwhile, American businesses have to consider move their operations to other parts of Asia rather than just in China, increasing the cost of business, that's for sure. What do you make of this mixed picture, given also the earlier stock market and bond market?
Well, I think that the mixed picture is the beginning of us truly seeing the negative impacts of the tariffs start to hit home. So, the Trump administration likes to talk about the fact that manufacturing jobs grew last year in 2018, but in 2019, that's not what we see happening. They're growing at a much, much slower rate. And, even when they were growing, the reality is that the way they were growing, with more steel and aluminum jobs saved or created in the United States, for instance, because of our 232 tariffs, those jobs cost American consumers and companies approximately $900,000 per job, which is 13 times more than the job actually pays. So they're growing at a great expense to Americans.
But Mr. Ashton, your president, President Trump, is now already very well known for using some mixed tactics as he sees it to boost up the economy. For example, talking to the Fed chairman and trying to cut so-called taxes of personal income, which has been scrapped off this suggestion over the past few days. Back and forth, these kind of things, drama going on. How do you read his mixed way of doing things? Is it more tactics, or is it more, shall I say, politics?
Maybe it's a little bit of both. I think that from my perspective, there's a desire in the Trump administration to stick to the approach to trade that they have initiated, which is, largely tariff-driven and dispute-driven. And there's a desire to try to stick out the negative impacts with the belief that somehow, after we sail through stormy seas, things will get better. And then in the meantime, asking that interest rates be reduced so that it's easier for American consumers to borrow money and spend money. But we're looking at a global economy where 30 of the world's countries have reduced interest rates this year. That hasn't happened since the global financial crisis.
That's
so
right.
I think that the signs are all there that this approach is hurting us, not helping us.
Mr. Liu, since you're based in Geneva, help us to understand also your perspective. I mean, when Ms. Ashton using the word maybe the sky will clear up after the stormy sea. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? But the question is, whether the others will be able to bear the stormy weather during this process. Can they be prepared? If they are not, they're going to also drag the other biggest economy, China, US included, down, isn't it, Mr. Liu?
Yeah, I think one thing is right. You have said, and Ashton has said that the China-U.S. bilateral conflict and the uncertainty it has brought forward will have serious impact on many beyond the two countries, and is global. And many, to be frank, are not prepared yet, simply because of this uncertainty. Nobody can predict what Trump would do. It has going doing this, and the next day that's the other thing. And then China has been always kind of hitting back, of course proportionately, but still a kind of escalation of the bilateral conflicts. So which brings a big kind of uncertainty for many people around the world. Here in Geneva, people are talking about that, what is going to happen? And that's the question, and nobody could answer it. So I think that the mood is very low, and people are just waiting to see and praying for a kind of how to say improvement of all the bilateral situation, and hoping that they could resolve their conflict. But nobody could promise anything.
What you used, a verb which is very impressive to me, praying for the improvement, if there is any, of the bilateral relations. Probably that is a reality that we are facing right now. Professor Gong, about China, also a crucial question. Though the Chinese economy is doing very well, still within 6% range GDP growth. But what China is relying on is the vast domestic market. Right. It's also relying on that there is still confidence in Chinese market all over the world. But will this be sustainable, Professor?
Well, I think if the global market is not doing well, it looks like which it looks like it's not going to do well. I think sooner or later it's going to come back to hurt us. Even though you look at the exports figures to countries other than the United States, we're still doing very well. We're doing well with ASEAN countries. We're doing well with European countries. But I think as if the global economy is going to get a recession, we're not going to be immune to that. I think sooner or later it's going to hit back home. But I think, but I think the good thing is that the Chinese government still has a lot of tools at hand. We have monetary tools, also fiscal tools. Not many countries in the world are afforded with this capability to still use the fiscal stimulus package, and we can still do that. So I think we have a little bit of a buffer room here.
Even though that is debated.
Even though it's debated, but I think when when time comes, if something we have to do, we have to do it. So I think jobs are very important here in China. We pay a lot of attention to jobs, right. And we can't afford to have a lot of people on the streets. So we, if that moment comes, we'll just do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, almost every 10 years, unfortunately, knock the wood, there would be something so-called the financial crisis or economic crisis. 2008. Also, and before that, 1999, and now we're also at the 10-year thing, if you look at that. And now we're facing also climbing of tensions at different fronts when it comes to trade relations. Would we be able to endure this stormy sea, in your words, Ms. Ashton? Finally, before we go.
I wouldn't bet on it. I think that we ought to change our tactics now before it's too late. Yeah. Because we very much could end up in Iraq.
Okay, Mr. Liu.
Well, I think, as I said earlier, that this depends very much on how the major players respond to that with the right policy options. And there are many issues ahead that we need to resolve properly, including China-U.S. trade conflict, including the Brexit, including the ongoing Japan and Korea trade disputes, so on and so forth. Yeah.
That's a lot of demand for global leadership and global governance, what you're saying over there, Mr. Liu. And finally, before we go, Professor Gong, briefly.
Well, every economy will weather through these stormy waters every time. I think countries.
Well, in a better shape or not in a better shape.
Well, I mean,
right?
the business. I mean, this is just business cycle. Economies are like that.
Okay.
Bad times do come, and we'll weather through this.
We have a philosopher in the room, obviously. For now, I want to thank the three of you for joining us, John Gong and Anna Ashton, Liu Xiangkun. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great weekend, no matter what. Thank you.